Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now in these verses, Allah starts explaining His signs once again to a nation that needed to be taught how to reflect. These were signs mentioned multiple times in the Torah, but given that the Arabs had never received a book of their own, nor could they read Hebrew to understand the Torah, they needed to be taught about the signs of Allah all around them. Now the word faliqu, which is mentioned in the opening verses 95 and 96, means cleaver. In other words, to split or cut something apart. So just as Allah splits open the grain and the date seed, allowing the plant to come out of the seed, He also splits open the night, allowing daylight to emerge. So nighttime is characterized by silence, immobility, a time for rest. It's very analogous to death. Daylight is characterized by a time of noise, hustle, bustle, activity. It's very much analogous to life. So just as Allah takes out the living plant from a dead seed, He takes out the daylight from the night. And what this means is the Almighty has the power to take out something beautiful from something that appears dark and lifeless and almost dead. Now, of course, what does this mean for us? In the same way that Allah can take out something beautiful from something that appears to be dark and dead, in the same way, Allah can take out the beautiful ruh that is inside of us from something that appears to be spiritually dead. So people who are chasing dunya appear to be spiritually lifeless. Allah has the ability of taking out that beautiful ruh so that they can achieve their potential, so that they can become the best version of themselves. And this is what is further explained in these upcoming verses. So Allah then says it is Allah who takes out the living from the dead and the dead from the living. But interestingly, you will see in verse 95, when mentioning Allah's ability to take out life, a verb is being used which is yukhriju. But when talking about Allah's ability to take out the dead from the living, a noun is being used which is mukhriju. Now verbs are temporary. Nouns are permanent. That's why whenever you study a language and you come across verbs, we talk about past, present, future tense. Because a verb does not last for long. It is temporary. Nouns go on forever. They are permanent. So this shows how subtle Allah is in the message that He is conveying to us, which is the fact that not all life will emerge from something that is a dead seed. So if something is dead, Allah uses the verb yukhriju to talk about life coming out of that dead seed, because it is not guaranteed that life will in fact come out, and if it does come out, it's going to be temporary. It's not possible for something that is living to continue living forever. Nothing is immortal except Allah Himself. And of course we can understand this because seeds also need a certain environment, including sunlight, soil, and water, for them to be able to thrive. If those conditions are not met, the seed will forever just remain dead. It will never split open. No life will ever come out of it. And some seeds we know are just bad. So there is no guarantee that life will in fact emerge from something that is lifeless, which makes sense to use a verb. And if it does come out, it's only temporary. But if something has life, then death is inevitable. Death is guaranteed. It has to come. And that's why when talking about taking out death from something that is living, Allah uses mukhriju, a noun. Because once death comes, it's permanent. There is no going back. And at the same time, death is guaranteed for something that is living, while life is not necessarily guaranteed for something that is dead. So you can see how this is linked to the message in verse 94 where Allah is warning the disbelievers about death. The angels of death will come to them. They will rip out their souls. They will be humiliated on the day of judgment. That is guaranteed. There is no escaping death. Life is not assured, but death is guaranteed for something that has life. In the same way, for those of us who are spiritually dead, there is no guarantee that that ruh, that beautiful life will in fact come out and we will become khalifas. Some of us will, some of us will not. So in the very same way, you can see that the analogy being used about seeds and fruits also applies to us. Once that beautiful life has come out, it can never remain forever. It is not immortal. It has to eventually die. It has to go back to its Lord for accountability. So similarly, the sun and moon for calculation of days, months, and years, as well as the stars to help guide us at night on land and sea, are all being mentioned in these verses as signs of Allah. They are signs of Allah's might and power, but they also are signs that force us to reflect and ask, why did Allah create all of this just for us if there was no point of this life, if there was no accountability, no mission, if there was no purpose, or if the purpose was just have fun and pursue your desires and pursue your dreams. In addition, we all have come from one soul, Adam alayhi salam. We all have the same chemical makeup, nafs, desires, emotions. We all feel jealousy, anger, hatred, greed, lust. We all are tempted by this dunya. We all are slaves of Allah, temporarily living here on earth to fulfill our mission, and we all have a final resting place, a place of death here on earth. And of course, why do we have to die? Why do we have to go back to Allah? Because we have to be accountable for our mission, for our purpose. Now, of course, what is that purpose? If the purpose was just have fun, is that the question that Allah will ask us when we die and go back to Allah? Is the only question He's going to ask us is, did you have fun? Did you make your life here on earth into Jannah? Because that was the mission. That was the purpose. And of course, if that is the purpose, then why would Allah even create a world in which there are so many things that are subjected to us? Why create such a complicated world with so many trees, rain, fruits, vegetables, animals, so much variety, if He was not going to ask us anything in exchange? If there was no purpose for all of this? If life was just about grab as much as you can and have fun? Why create so much variety in color, form, and taste of just fruits and vegetables if there was nothing that Allah was going to ask us in exchange? Why would Allah create an earth that serves us and is ideal for us to live in if there was nothing Allah wanted from us? In fact, the examples of fruits also carries another important message for insan. Verse 99 mentions that fruits are all similar, yet they are different. They all emerge from a seed when given the correct, right conditions, but when they ripen, they all look different in terms of color, size, taste. Now, they all are similar in the sense that all fruits taste sweet, but each fruit has a unique, different taste. So all fruits are similar, yet they are all unique and different in their own way. Now, in the same way, insan also comes from a human seed called an ovum. That ovum also needs the exact right conditions that it is able to attain in the uterus. But of course, when that insan emerges and grows up, they all look different. We all come in different sizes and colors. We all have different personalities. We all have different qualities. So just like fruits, we all have come from a seed, so we are similar, yet we all are different. And then you can also see that we all have been split into nations, where people belonging to a particular country or a particular nation tend to look similar to each other. And they tend to look different from people that belong to a different nation or that belong to a different country. So just like apples kind of look the same, but they are different from mangoes and grapes, in the same way, people that belong to a particular country or nation tend to have the same kind of features, the same kind of appearance, yet they look very, very different from people that belong to a different nation. That's why when you see someone, it's kind of easy to know where that person has come from, which country he belongs to. And then again, similar to fruits, just like all fruits have a different unique taste, but they all are similar in the sense that their taste is sweet. In the very same way, all people have their own unique characteristics, unique qualities, unique personality, but what is common in all of them is they all have sweetness inside of them. In other words, that sweetness comes in the form of the ruh. Everyone has the ability of being nice, kind, loving, forgiving, merciful, compassionate. Everyone has the ability of doing good deeds and worshipping the one true God. So just like Allah is the cleaver who rips and takes out the beautiful light from the dark, who rips open the dead seed and takes out the beautiful plant, the Quran can help rip and take out the ruh from the human body so that a person can truly be a Khalifa. But of course, to do that, it's not just the Quran. That's where our jihad and our struggle comes in. You need to rip and take out the layers of jealousy, hatred, anger, frustration, love and obsession of dunya. You need to rip apart all those layers, and that's when the beautiful ruh can actually come out. And of course, when that beautiful ruh does come out, that's when insan becomes a Khalifa. That's when he becomes the best version of himself. That's when he looks beautiful to everyone who can see him, and he emits a lot of positive, radiant energy. But of course, this is not going to be true for everyone. Some will be able to rip and take out their ruh and become Khalifas, and some will not. So just like in the case of fruits, some fruits will ripen and they will look beautiful to those who can see them, but other fruits will just appear to be very bad. They will not turn out to be good at all. In the same way, some humans will turn out to become beautiful Khalifas. Everyone who can see them will feel their energy, and some will just not. Some humans will be very sweet, just like a ripened fruit, in the sense that every word that comes out of their mouth will be filled with positivity, encouragement, motivation, and of course it will be packed with knowledge and the truth. And others will only have bad and bitter words that come out of their mouth. They will be toxic for themselves and they will be toxic to other people. Now, of course, just like every fruit was meant to be sweet, but some fruit will turn out to be bad and they will just rot. In the same way, every man, every human being who turns out to be evil will have the ability of being sweet. That ruh was definitely inside of him, but he chose to keep it dormant. He chose to ignore it. He chose to not allow that sweetness to come out. And that's why what ended up coming out was bitterness, an evil and terrible version of him. So yes, every human being has the ability of being sweet and kind, has the ability of being the best version of himself, has the ability of being a beautiful slave of Allah. But whether they choose to or not is entirely up to them. Those who decide to follow their ruh, follow their fitrah, they will become a Khalifa. Those who choose to go against their fitrah, they will end up becoming a toxic, evil, bitter version of themselves. Now, having described these signs, Allah states that still many have attributed others to Allah. So despite explaining all these beautiful signs, instead of reflecting and thinking about it, people at that time and even now are just too busy coming up with lies and fabrications, making up stories about Allah which are totally false. For example, 1400 years ago, people started worshipping not just idols but also the jinn, because they claim that Allah's created the jinn and the jinn and Allah have some kind of partnership. In the same way, they fabricated lies about Allah calling angels the daughters of God, and they also claim that God has sons as well. But at no point did they even reflect that if Allah is the originator of everything in the heavens and the earth, He's all-powerful, everything is in His control, why would He even need a son and a daughter? Humans need children, especially when we become old, so that those kids can look after us. Why would Allah need children? Why would Allah, who has created everything, who has power and might and control over every single thing, why would He even need children, or a partner, or a companion, or anything? We know that no vision can grasp Allah, while He has grasp over all vision. Does that sound like a God who would need a companion, an associate, a partner, a helper, or a child? So having explained all these signs, Allah re-emphasizes an early message given to the Prophet and to all the believers. The argument of Allah is clear. There is no doubt in it. So pass it on to others and engage in debate with someone who only truly wishes to understand. But as for the rest, who just want to waste time, even though their hearts know the truth, and they just want to base their arguments on lies, stories, fabrications, understand that you are not a guardian over them. Your job is not to control them, make sure that they give up their ego and arrogance, make sure they accept the truth. That's not the job. The job is to convey the message and move on. Something I also mentioned in the previous session, which is the fact that you should know where to invest your time and effort in terms of arguments, intellectual arguments. If you have to intellectually argue with someone who is willing to listen, who has an open mindset, who is sincerely searching for the truth, not investing time on someone who just wants to base his entire argument on lies, stories, fabrications, falsehood, and who has already decided that he's not going to listen to anything you have to say. Then in verse 105, Allah states that He diversifies the signs, implying that He explains something in so many different ways, using so many different signs and so many different examples, so that they will say that He has studied it, and so that the Quran can be made clear for people who know. Now, what does this verse mean? Many scholars suggest that saying He has studied it implies that people at that time were accusing someone of teaching Muhammad, peace be upon him, things that were mentioned in the previous books of Torah and Injil. So instead of accepting him as a prophet, they were suggesting that he seems to have so much knowledge, and he's explaining things with so many different signs and so many different analogies, because someone is teaching him things that are mentioned in Torah and Injil. So he has studied it, or he is being taught it. That's why he's saying things that are so similar to the previous books. It's not that he's a prophet, he is studying it. Now, although this interpretation can be correct, it doesn't seem to fit the message being given in the verse. Why would Allah state that He explained the Quran with so many different signs and analogies only because He wants the disbelievers to say that the Prophet is studying it, or someone is teaching the Prophet? Because if that is the case, then how does that make the Quran clear for people? Doesn't that create more confusion? Doesn't that create more doubt? And is this the only reason Allah keeps talking about the same thing using different analogies and different examples, just so that people can point a finger at the Prophet and doubt him? Now, instead, a more possible interpretation is that Allah is explaining things using so many different analogies, so many different examples, and so many different signs, so that everyone will testify in their hearts that such words of wisdom and such diverse knowledge must be coming from Allah. It cannot be stories or lies being made up by a man. It has to be the truth, because Muhammad, peace be upon him, has truly studied it, and he studied it well, and he's explaining it well. So for example, if you make up a lie and then you start to spread it, many people will question you about your lie. And to answer their questions, you will have to make even more lies, and eventually you will hit a dead end. Falsehood and lies have to perish. It cannot last for long. So eventually your lies will be exposed. But in the case of the Prophet, the verses he kept reciting, the signs he kept giving, the words of wisdom he kept explaining were always very consistent. So even though he was explaining one thing using many, many different analogies and different examples and different signs, every single time he just made the Quran even more clear, which is actually not possible for a human being. Because when you explain one thing using so many different analogies and examples over time, you're bound to reach a point where you will start to become inconsistent, where you will start to say something that is a little bit contradicting something that you had said before. It's not humanly possible to talk about one thing in so many different ways and to be 100% consistent. But the one beautiful thing about the Prophet is that the more he explained and the more he taught, the more he made the Quran and life very, very clear to people. And people understood that this cannot be coming from a human, this must be coming from God, because it's not humanly possible. So that's why they said he has truly studied it. In other words, he has truly understood the truth. That's why he's explaining the truth. And that's why there is no inconsistency or no contradiction in what he's saying. No matter how many questions he was asked, he always had a brilliant answer that was always consistent with everything he had said previously. In fact, his answers were exposing the lies of others. So this was the benefit of explaining things with so many different signs. It makes it even more clear in the hearts of everyone that this has to be coming from God. Now this part is also important for us to understand, because at times many of us wonder, why does Allah keep repeating certain signs over and over again? For instance, Allah mentions stars, sun, moon, night, day, fruits and trees. He mentions it so many different times. So why does Allah keep mentioning these things? The Quran is meant for people of all times. Today, given our level of intellectual advancement, we focus on those verses that give us a hint about the Big Bang, the black hole, the shape of the earth, the fact that the universe is expanding and eventually will start contracting. These verses appeal to us and they make it clear to us that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was definitely a prophet. He could not have known this 1400 years ago. But for people living 1400 years ago who didn't have such scientific knowledge, what appealed to them was verses that were talking about plants, fruits, palm trees, different yet similar. These things made sense to them because that was their level of intellectual advancement at that time. So that is why the Quran contains knowledge that appeals to people in every time period. But in any case, Allah now re-emphasizes in verse 107, if Allah wanted, He could have made everyone believe, but that would defy the concept of free will. So the Prophet is told that his job is only to propagate the message. He has not been appointed over people as a guardian or a manager. If people want to listen to him, that's great. If they want to ignore him, he will not be questioned. And of course, the same goes for us. We have to propagate the message and teach other people, but not to the extent that we mentally torture ourselves. If people want to listen, that's great. If they choose to ignore, we will not be held accountable for the bad choices that other people make. Assalamu alaikum.